Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is and whatever part of the world you're at right now. Welcome back. And today we're going to do a review and talk about parallel and perpendicular lines in a coordinate plane. Okay. And more specifically, like what makes lines parallel versus what makes lines perpendicular. Now, to kind of jumpstart this, one of the things you need to be able to find the slope from a graph, okay? Using, finding your rise over your run, and to don't forget about zero slopes and undefined slopes, okay? And we'll talk about a little bit more what that looks like, okay? But more specific, just to give a brief thing, zero slopes, remember, are horizontal lines, side to side. Undefined slopes are vertical lines, okay? Now, if they give you ordered pairs, for example, x1 comma y1 and x2 comma y2, you should be able to use the slope formula. M equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1 to find the slope, okay? Now, they may also give us equations in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Or they may give it to us in standard form. Standard form is ax plus by equals c, okay? Now, for equations, if it's in slope-intercept form, the slope is going to be the coefficient of x. However, if the equation is in standard form, then we have to solve for y, okay, in order to identify the slope. All right, so those are things that we need to remember. We got to make sure that we already know how to do in order to answer these type of questions or to apply this information to work. All right, so let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit. Says describe the slope of parallel lines. Well, the slope of parallel lines are the same. Parallel lines have the same slope, okay? The slope is the same. Now, what about the slope of perpendicular lines? Those slopes are what we call opposite reciprocals. Opposite reciprocals, right? All right, now what are opposite reciprocals? Opposite reciprocals basically are exactly what they say. Opposite means they have to be, one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and reciprocals, they have to be reciprocals of each other. So for example, the reciprocal of positive 1/2, or the opposite reciprocal of positive 1/2 would be negative 2/1. So negative 2/1 and positive 1/2 are opposite reciprocals. Negative 4/3 and positive 3/4 are opposite reciprocals. Okay. Also, opposite reciprocals would be 0 and undefined. Okay, let me just slide it over. Undefined. So when we're talking about opposite reciprocals, all right, that is what the slope should look like. And let me put some lines in here. All right. So those are three separate examples of opposite reciprocals. All right. Positive 1/2 and negative 2/1. Negative 3/4 and negative 4/3 and positive 3/4. And the last example I put up there was 0 and undefined. Those are all opposite reciprocals. Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and go through these next couple of questions where we're either going to find the slope from a graph, find the slope from ordered pairs, or find the slope from equations to identify whether those lines are perpendicular or parallel. Okay. So it says for questions 16 and 17, give the slopes of the lines that are parallel and perpendicular to the line on the graph. So we have to find the slope of the line on the graph and then say what a parallel slope would be and what a perpendicular slope would be. So if we're looking at the graph for number 16, we're going to start with the point all the way to the left, okay? And we're going to go down 1 unit. Let me use a different color here. So we go down 1 unit, so that's -1, and then we go to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So our slope, the slope of this line here is equal to -1/4, all right? So now going back to what we said, parallel lines have the same slope. So if it was a parallel slope, it would have m equals -1/4. However, if it's perpendicular are opposite reciprocals. So the opposite would be positive, and the reciprocal would be 4/1. And those two slopes would be said to be perpendicular, okay? Now, let's take a look at number 17. Now, number 17 is a vertical line, okay? This is a vertical line. Now, the reason I'm identifying it as a vertical line is because all vertical lines have undefined slope. M is equal to undefined. Okay, so another parallel slope would have to be undefined because parallel lines have the same slope. Now, what's perpendicular to undefined? A 0 slope. So for a perpendicular slope, it would have to be n would have to be equal to 0. Okay. All right. Let's keep moving. Numbers 18 through 20, we're gonna have to use our slope formulas to figure out if line AB and line CD are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Now, one thing I did not discuss were the symbols for parallel and perpendicular. So for parallel, let me go back up here. Parallel lines, you use it's a symbol that looks like 2 lowercase L's next to each other. And for perpendicular lines, it's an upside down capital T. So if you see this symbol, let me change the color. Let's say if you see the yellow symbol or this gold symbol, that means perpendicular. This represents perpendicular. And if you see the blue one, this blue one here represents parallel. Oops, not spelling parallel, right? There we go. All right, so we're gonna use those symbols when we answer these questions. And for neither we're gonna use the symbol like that, neither. Or NA, you know what, we can just use NA, not applicable, okay? Or we can just write out neither, doesn't matter. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at number 18. So we need to find the slope between A and B and C and D. So x1, y1, x2, y2. And then I have to label C and D as x1, y1, x2, y2. So let's find the red ones first. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's going to give us -12 minus 3 divided by 2 minus -4. That's going to equal -15 over 2 plus 4. Oops. That becomes -15 over +6, which equals, we got to reduce that, -5 over 2. So the red ones are -5 over 2. All right, now for the C and D. it's gonna be m is equal to, and let me do this one over here. So let's cut that off so we're not confusing anybody. All right, m is equal to y2, which is 1 minus 5 divided by 0 minus 10. That's going to be negative 5 divided by negative 10. Negative divided by negative is a positive. So that's positive 5 over 10. And we can reduce that to positive 1/2. So this slope is 1/2. These are neither. They are not parallel. They are not perpendicular. Neither. All right, let's take a look at number 19. Same thing. Label them x1, y1, x2, y2, and then we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So for the red ones, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then we have, that's going to be y2 is negative 15 minus 3 over 8 minus 2, which is equal to negative 18 minus 6. And negative 18, oh, excuse me, not minus 6, divided by 6. And negative 18 divided by 6 is negative 3. Or we can say negative 3 over 1. So negative 3 over 1. All right, now let's do the blue ones. For the blue ones, draw a little squiggly lines, keep everything separated. M equals 11 minus 2 divided by negative 5 minus negative 2. That becomes 9 divided by negative 5 plus 2, which becomes 9 divided by negative 3, and positive 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3, or we can write negative 3 over 1. So negative 3 or negative 3 over 1, which both of these would be said to be parallel. Okay, so we use a parallel symbol. All right, 20. Once again, x1, y1, x2, y2, and then the same thing. x1, y1, x2, y2. All right, so for the red, we got m equals y2. I know a lot of you may be asking, why do I keep writing the formula over each time? It's just a habit to help me and help others memorize formula. This is how mathematicians memorize formulas. Every time you use the formula, you write the formula down, okay? Or you need to usually write it down. So getting back to our problem, y2 for the reds is 6, y1 is 6. And then x2 is negative 1, x1 is 5. That's going to be 0 divided by negative 6, and 0 divided by anything is just 0. So for the A and B, the slope is 0. Let's cut that off. All right. Now let's do the blue ones. M is equal to y2 is negative 4, y1 is negative 7. All right. Divided by negative 2 minus negative 2. So we gotta switch some things around. That's gonna be negative 4 plus 7. That's gonna be negative 2 plus 2. Negative 4 plus 7 is positive 3. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And anything divided by 0 is undefined. Okay? So this is undefined. Now, as we stated earlier, a 0 slope and an undefined slope are perpendicular. So these two would be said to be perpendicular. All right. And now we have one last section to determine if they're parallel or perpendicular. We have to look at these equations and figure out the slopes. Well, for number 21, we have y equals 1x plus 6, and we have the equation x. 1x minus 1y equals 2. Now, the first equation is in slope-intercept form. This is slope-intercept form, okay? Oops, let me erase that, write that correctly. And the other equation is in standard form. Now, if you remember up here, we wrote that if it's in slope-intercept form, the slope is the coefficient of the x variable. But if it's in standard form, we have to solve for y. So if we go back down here, as we look, the first equation is in slope-intercept form. So for the first equation, m is equal to positive 1. But for the second equation, we have to solve for y in order to figure out what the slope is. So we would subtract 1x from both sides. That would leave us with negative 1y equals 2 minus 1x, right? And then we would divide everything by negative 1, where y equals negative 2. Because 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2. And negative 1x divided by negative 1x, negative 1x divided by negative 1 would become positive 1x. And now as we look, remember, we're looking for the coefficient of x. So in the second equation, the slope, once again, is equal to 1. Okay? And we see that right here. Here's the coefficient of x, right? That's 1. So both of these are said to be parallel because they are the same. All right, let's take a look at the next 22. This one, the first one is in standard form, which means we have to solve for y. And the second one is in slope-intercept form, which means we just need to look for the coefficient of x. So let's do that first. Coefficient of x for number 20, and the second one is 2, so, negative 2. So m equals negative 2. Now for the second one, we have to solve for y. So we have 1x minus 2y equals 8. We subtract 1x from both sides, so that's going to be negative 2y equals 8 minus 1x. Then we divide everything by negative 2. 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 1x divided by negative 2 is positive 1/2 x. And then we need to identify the coefficient. The coefficient of x is positive 1/2. So then we would write that over here. M equals positive 1/2. Now, positive 1/2 and negative 2, or we could write this as negative 2 over 1, right? Or negative 2 over 1. So which would make these perpendicular, because they're opposite reciprocals, okay? Now, let's take a look at number 23. Number 23, both of these are in standard form. Both equations. So we have to solve for y for both of them. So for the first one, we have 4x plus 3y equals 9. We're going to subtract 4x from both sides, so that's 3y equals 9 minus 4x. Then we're going to divide everything by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Negative 4x divided by 3 is just 4/3 x, which means that our slope here, m, is equal to negative 4/3. Okay, and let's do the second one. The second one, we have 3x plus 4y equals 36. Okay. Then we subtract 3x from both sides, so that becomes 4y equals 36 minus 3x. Divide everything by 4. So 36 divided by 4 is 9, and negative 3 divided by 4 is negative 3/4 x, which makes the slope here, m, is equal to negative 3/4. All right. Now, we have to establish the relationship between these two slopes. They are reciprocals. 4/3 and 3/4 are reciprocals, but they're not opposites because both of them are negative. So this would be neither. They're not parallel, they're not perpendicular. Let's take a look at the last one. Both of these don't have a slope. So our slope here for both of these equations, these are already, let me say this, these are in slope-intercept form. Both of them are already in slope-intercept form. Let's stay consistent with that. Slope-intercept form, okay? Now, for the first equation, y equals 5, m is 0. And for the second equation, y equals negative 2, m is 0. The slope is 0. Now, that means that both of these lines are parallel. Okay? And before we wrap this up, I just want to show you something else. Let's say we'll make this number 25. And we had x equals negative 9 and y equals 0. Now, in this case, these will be said to be perpendicular, okay? And the reason for that being, for this equation, x equals negative 9, m is undefined, okay? And for this equation, we already know that m, the slope, is equal to 0. And the 0 slope and the undefined slope are perpendicular, okay? So hopefully that helps you all out. I'll see you all back next time for another review. Deuces.